What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to episode number 309 of the VK Bros with Jason and Alex Von Cannell. Jam-packed show today. We are going to be full of blatant government hypocrisy, as we usually are. Can I start with a personal story, which I think you might find slightly entertaining, Alex?
Yeah, sure.
So, I caught up with Alex yesterday, last night.
That's why I've just put glasses on because my eyes are bloodshot from the amount of wines I had last night.
Your eyes are the same colour as the wine you were drinking, funnily enough. But I'd also caught up with the parents yesterday, and my parents had given me a package from you that had some of your old pants in it, because now that you're a shrinking violet, you've been losing weight. So you thought, I'll help a brother out because my old fat boy pants might fit my fat boy brother. So anyway, when we got home from dinner last night, Amanda was like pulling out the pants and stuff like that and pulled these shorts out. And when she pulled them out, because it was her pulling them out, not me, the size difference, do you remember that scene from Shadow Hal when he pulls the underwear out and they're giant?
Yeah.
That's what it looked like. And I was like, what is Alex's problem? Like, he thinks these gigantic Shallow Hal-esque fat boy pants are going to fit me. Anyway, I've got them on this morning and they fit perfectly. So thanks, brother.
Somehow I knew. But it was good. Like, I didn't want to... Some of those pants are like almost never worn.
Right.
And maybe some of them are like an online one, or where maybe it was just a frag too big for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously I'm down like 2 pant sizes. So
yeah.
I'm glad that I didn't have to throw them away. And
yeah, it's good. I'm upcycling them.
Fat brother can use them.
Now, I want to get stuck.
Well, thank you for dinner last night too, by the way. That was
right.
That was a lot of fun.
Happy birthday, mate. I was only a month late, but we got there eventually. All right, I want to start off with something, and it's a bit from a little bit of left field, but it's a speech that Julia Gillard made recently, and it's a very, very short clip of it. I want to play the speech, and then I want to apply some context, if we can do that, please, Alex. So, actually, sorry, before you start it, Julia Gillard was presenting at, I don't know, some university doing something in whatever capacity it is that she's currently doing that. And as part of her presentation, she was asked a question. And the question was around her government. So when she was the Prime Minister back in 2012, 2013, their government's decision to remove the definition of woman from the Sex Discrimination Act. And this was her answer.
If you look at the parliamentary debates in the changes to the Sex Discrimination Act in 2012, you'll find that the issues you're referring to were not raised by anyone because they simply weren't a matter of public discourse the way they are today. So it was a different time. It wasn't something squarely before the Parliament at the time that the legislation was being amended. So I think we make an error in uplifting what we know now and public discourse now and just putting it down 14 years ago. If you look...
Well, hold on. My first question, then why did you do it at all?
Yeah, that's an interesting question to ask. So here's my take on this. This is something we see all too often out of politicians, and the only reason why they are able to do this is because we, as a voter base, fail to hold them accountable. So what she completely ignores in that statement. So again, just to clarify for people, she was the PM. She removed the definition of biological woman out of the Sex Discrimination Act. And even that is just completely crazy just to begin with, right? You have an act, the whole sole purpose of it is to make sure people are not discriminated against based on their sex in this country, and you remove the definition of what sex even means in the act itself, right? At that point in time, you should have just thrown the whole act in the bin and decide it was redundant and forget about it, if that's what you were going to do.
What does Orwell call that? Where basically
it's kind of doublespeak, isn't it?
Doublespeak, yeah, because it's contradictory in itself.
Correct.
The Sex Discrimination Act removing the
definition of sex. Therefore, how can you define discrimination? Well, it's all up to interpretation of whoever the judge is at the time, right?
Yeah.
But this happens all the time. So what she has completely failed to acknowledge in her speech is, or in her answer, the reason why the discourse is different today than it was back then was because she opened Pandora's box by changing the legislation.
Yep.
And the reality is, like, there are, many different types of people in the world, and some of those people are predators. And predators are just sitting, waiting for an opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. You watch any nature video, there'll be the lion on the Serengeti, and there'll be a, pack of water buffalo. Water buffalo, very strong, very difficult for a lion to fight. But when the water buffalo are running away and there's a little baby calf, the little easy morsel, the little thing that's easy to pick off, that's what the predator targets because it's the easy kill. And what she fails to acknowledge is that her change to that legislation created the opportunity for these predators to then come through and utilize that change in the law to suit themselves. And now the discourse has changed. So she's not acknowledged her effect on the discourse. The second thing that I'll say is she kind of, I don't know if this is my perception, correct me if I'm wrong, my perception was she was being criticized for making those changes because of what's happening today. And she's kind of trying to say, without saying it, had the discourse back then been the same as the discourse today, we probably wouldn't have made the changes.
Yeah, that's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
But this is another issue that I have with politics too. And like you said, it's the accountability thing. But they know what these unintended consequences are going to be.
Of course.
Like, you'd have to be a fucking moron.
They're the intended consequences, Alex.
Yeah. But it's easy... because you get out of government, now I can't be responsible for any of that stuff. I'm not in government anymore. Like, that's today's government to figure out. It just goes to show like how like we don't do any forward thinking.
Yep.
And how, I mean, the question I have, and maybe I need to watch that whole speech. Why was it changed? Why was it changed at all? What was the discourse at the time? Yeah.
Well, don't forget too, that like Julia Gillard is famous for her misogyny speech at Tony Abbott. She was the one saying, I will not be lectured on misogyny by that man, who also just happens to be a married father of 4 daughters, by the way, like as if he doesn't know a thing or two about women. But she was famous and was like celebrated for this anti-misogyny speech that she launched at Tony Abbott over his comments, which I believe were about this bill to begin with. And yet, the most misogynist thing that has ever happened in this country was her government removing the definition of what it means to be a woman. Now, here's the second thing I'll say about her comments before, right? So this was the way I took it. She still wants to take credit for her prime ministership, even though she wasn't duly elected. She was not voted in. She was a replacement prime minister. She wants to take credit for it. She doesn't want to take any of the blame for where the discourse has gone to. So she's absolving herself of any fault in the current discourse we experience now. But she did sort of make it indicate, like as if she was trying to get the questioner on side of like, I got the feeling if the discourse was as it is today, she wouldn't have made the change. But she hasn't gone out and spoken publicly toward this government saying, hey, my government's decision-making was based on this context and these pretenses. It's gone wrong. We need to have a serious conversation about changing this back and restoring those protections for women, and et cetera, et cetera. She's a very public figure, right? Everyone knows who Julia Gillard is. And if you were trying to campaign for women's rights, do you not think the only female prime minister in our history would have the weight behind her voice to get women on board to go, yeah, we should actually reassess this legislation and we should define again what it means to actually be a woman in this country, to have sex-based protections for women, which is the whole point of a sex discrimination legislation in the first place. But she hasn't done any of that either. So when you said before that they don't think about these like unintended consequences, you need to understand that these are intended consequences. They know this is what the agenda is. They know what's going to happen down the track. It's exactly the same as, right? It's the 3rd of July. Congratulations to all of the minimum wage earners out there. You guys just got yourself a pay rise. Congratulations. Thanks, Albo. You got a pay rise. So Albo gets to claim good guy credits for getting all of you guys a pay rise. And then all of that pay rise will be sucked away in a month's time due to the inflation caused by the businesses having to pay you that additional money. And then when the RBA comes out next month and goes, well, we've had an uplift in spending into the economy and we've had inflation on certain goods and services, therefore we're going to have to raise interest rates, and then any advantage you got out of that raise to the minimum wage is already gone. And we've further entrenched more inflation and more financial pain. But Albo still goes out there. He knows this stuff is going to happen. And the reason why he knows it is he's already done it multiple times since 2022. And the same result happens every time. You increase the minimum wage and then the inflation goes up. It's the same every time.
Lefties love that. Lefties love things that feel good even though they are bad. They love it. They love it. I had this conversation with someone yesterday. It was like, and this is not, I've stolen this pitch off someone else, which is left-wing politics is doing politics on easy mode or with training wheels on, because it's very easy to say that, young people, minimum wage earners should earn more money, right? That's an easy argument. No one's going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
But it's harder to say, well, when that happens, you have these unintended consequences of inflation and the cost of everything goes up. So no, they shouldn't have. The government shouldn't step in and decide what the lower cap for minimum wage should be. It should be up to businesses and the free market to decide. Like, that's actually hard to say.
Yeah.
And then the joke version of it is like, it's very easy to dunk on billionaires, right? It's very easy to say, billionaires could fix all the world's problems if they did this, this, and this. It's very hard to shit on poor people.
Yeah, but it's not even shitting on poor people. It's just telling poor people, hey, you actually have agency and there are things that you can do to help yourself. And if you are, let's say that you are a fan of socialism and communism, right? Socialism and communism was not all about just receiving free things. It was about giving based on your capabilities and receiving based on your needs, right?
Yeah.
Which means you still have to give based on your capabilities. So if you're a young person thinking socialism sounds great because cost of living is too expensive, so I just want to receive all this free money, well, you have to understand that the free stuff that you get comes from someone else. And again, it's mainly the young people who are physically and mentally capable of working that the most gets taken from, and it's given to the older people, right? So it's this whole dichotomy of it's just the politics of envy, right? I put leftist politics down to, like, my analogy for it is it's like the year seveners going for school captain. And, they get to stand up in front of their peers and make a speech. And they're like, and when I become school captain, I propose we get a third lunch break and that everyone gets free tuck shop. And then the crowd's like,
huzzah! Huzzah!
Yeah, and everyone votes for that kid, right? Because it sounds great. But it's just handing out freebies that are paid for by someone else. Now, look, the other thing, too, is that none of this stuff ever happens, right? But they say it anyway. But this, you're right. Like, it is a tougher sell to be a conservative. It is a tougher sell because conservatism, by definition, it's freedom through personal responsibility.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Like, so I'm a conservative person. I have some progressive viewpoints on some things. Like, I like the fact that we have a public health system. I know that there's heaps of wastage in it, and I would love to streamline it and fix a lot of that stuff. And there's lots of things we can fix. But I like the fact that we live in a country that if you fall over and break your leg and get taken to hospital and have emergency surgery, it's not going to bankrupt you like what the stories you hear out of the United States and stuff like that. But I also don't want that stuff to happen, right? I don't want to break my own leg because I don't want to have to be part of the system, and I don't want to take money that I didn't earn. And like, you should not want to just get a free way through life. I would much rather that the government leaves me and my family the fuck alone, gives me as much of my own personal income that I earn through my labor and my expertise, and gives it to myself, and I can decide where I deploy that capital. But it's the irony, right? Like, I posted, actually, I'll see if I can pull this up, because I only posted this morning. There was a thing I saw on Insta. Where is it?
And just for those people, while you pull that
here you go, I've got it. I'll just say this and then you can share your bit. So, the contradiction of those who claim, in quotes, capitalism allows wealthy oligarchs to accumulate power, serve themselves, and control the lives of ordinary people, when their solution is give political elites control over the economy, production, and the distribution of resources. Socialism does not eliminate concentrated power. It merges economic power with the power of the state. So this is what you talk about all the time. It is the socialists who constantly scream about fascism.
Yeah.
Fascism, the original definition of fascism, was when the state and the private sector joined forces to control the people. That was the original definition of fascism.
Yeah.
That's what socialism and communism is.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that doublespeak contradiction. That's the cognitive dissonance that these people experience. And it's interesting because
just to be clear, the inverse of that is individual freedom.
Correct. But individual freedom comes with individual responsibility. You are responsible for yourself and your families and your actions and your activities, and you're responsible for how good a life it is that you get to experience.
Yeah. And I think it's very easy to gauge which one is right. Like, the government doesn't know what's best for me. The government doesn't know what's best for you. There's some research that talks about like leadership, and apparently like tribal leaders only work up to a certain number of people within that tribe, and it's not a very big number.
Mm-hmm.
It's like hundreds.
Yeah,
and yet here we've got an organizational body in the government that's trying to lead, in quotes,
mm-hmm.
27 million people.
Mm-hmm.
It does not work. There's no way that one policy can help or benefit 27 million people. But if 27 million people were given the autonomy to do what's in their own best self-interest, we would be better and more prosperous. Now, you can look at all of history. So America is the best example of this. The New World, when they went over, they started essentially from scratch, and they built a civilization based on individual liberty and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom of speech being the First Amendment, of their constitution. And
the Second Amendment being explicitly there to protect the First.
Right. That became the most prosperous and wealthiest empire on planet Earth in the shortest amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. Go look at Argentina. Years and decades of socialism put the whole country into poverty. One of the most resource-rich countries on the planet, just like us.
Yep.
Just like us. Socialist policies sent them into poverty.
Mm-hmm.
A libertarian leader in Javier Milei comes in and turns the whole paradigm on its head.
Yeah.
No public spending, no stupid government departments, reining in government spending. And what was the stat that we read out a couple of weeks ago? He's already pulled 50% of the people in poverty out of poverty in 18 months.
It was 1.2 million kids were removed from poverty in 18 months. And again, look at the difference in how he would be marketed on media in Australia compared to the reality amongst the people, right? So he gets marketed as this, he was far-right figure, right? Pro-Trump, far-right figure, all about the billionaires and exploiting people and blah, 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 blah. And you say this all the time. He said from the beginning, he will not fly first class until their economy is restored and everyone is out of poverty. And he flies coach with the people and they celebrate him for it. What do our politicians do? So we've got the absolute polar opposite of this, which is the champagne socialists, right? It's socialism for you. It's the
buck wild oligarch style kingdom. Like, okay, it makes no sense to me. Like, even if you're like a corporate CEO, okay, do you have an expense account? Yeah, but I don't know any CEOs that are running expenses in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I don't know if we spoke about this the other day. Did you guys see that since Albo took the office in 2022, his expenses that he charges to the taxpayer have been $15 million.
Yeah, that's outrageous.
And again, like, I don't pretend for a second that the Prime Minister of this country should not have some of their expenses taken care of. They don't get paid that much money. Like, let's be honest. He gets paid less than Jacinta Allen does to be the Premier of Victoria. right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's running the whole country. He gets paid less than she does.
I would argue they should get paid more. Like a
Agree.
PM should be on $1 million.
Yep. And because then you would attract a higher quality of applicant to do those positions, right? Your Mark Borises of the world might get out of bed to be a PM if he's not only if it's not going to cost him so much money. But this is the thing, like, Albo is this guy who every single day is trying to stand up in front of the Australian people and talk about intergenerational fairness. And we're doing this to give the children the same opportunities that we had when we were kids, blah, 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 blah. And everyone's got to, we've all got to pay more tax because he's trying to create this fair world. Meanwhile, he spent $15 million on expenses in 4 years. You don't think he could have halved that? You don't think he could have saved $7.5 million over 4 years in maybe some slightly cheaper flights? Maybe some doing a couple of meetings by Zoom instead of flying in for it. Maybe not getting those, is it Comcars or whatever, to just drive around fucking Canberra. Maybe buy a car and drive it yourself, champ. Like, we're in $1 trillion worth of debt. We pay $26 billion a year in interest on the debt. And he's racking up $15 million over 4 years just in expenses.
Again, I've just punched this into AI. Asked how much does Javier Milei get paid?
Yeah.
So as of early 2026, Argentine President Javier Milei's gross monthly salary is approximately 4 million Argentine pesos, which is $4,500 US a month.
Yeah.
Okay. This figure reflects a period of salary freeze from late 23 to 25 as part of austerity measures, though recent reports indicate plans to adjust executive salaries in 26 to recover lost purchasing power. So the current salary context, Milei froze his own and his cabinet's salaries in 2023, even cancelling a controversial 48% pay rise that had been automatically triggered by prior agreements. This is significantly lower than the salaries of members of Congress and the Supreme Court, who are on like double what he's on. While cabinet ministers reportedly saw their salaries doubled via a backdated decree in early 26, Milei and Vice President Victoria Villarreal were explicitly excluded from this increase, keeping their salaries frozen.
Yeah.
For reference, Argentina's minimum wage as of 2026 was $346,000, so it's very low, making the president's salary roughly 12 times higher than the national minimum. But he's doing the
12 times
opposite
higher than minimum wage.
minimum wage.
Yeah.
What's our minimum wage? 40 grand, 50 grand or something.
45-ish, yeah.
So what's that as a proportion of what Albo's on?
It's about what he's on.
Yeah. So there is, and like I keep saying here, when I raise these ideas with people, they just look at me like I've got two heads. But there are other countries that are just doing it better. These aren't my ideas. These aren't new ideas. This is picking ideas from different areas, spaces, history, and applying them in the lens of today. Because we know it works. What Javier Milei is doing is working. And we need it here. We need some austerity here. We need a smaller government here. We need to spend a lot less than what we're spending. But the fact that $15 million on expenses is madness.
It's ludicrous. And that's just Albo. And look, he's spent the most. But you've got guys like, even like Chris Bowen is spending like $350,000 a quarter just in expenses. And it's like, if you extrapolate that out over all of the different MPs, and here's the thing too,
I heard a car crash got 45 grand for a car crash. Why do he crash?
Oh, no, it wasn't 45 grand. Chris Bowen crashed his car, and there was a $1,000 insurance excess, and the taxpayer paid his $1,000 insurance excess. Yeah, but again, okay, this is where, like, to me, this is the stuff that I focus on all the time, because the thing that I've been saying for years is that the most insidious thing about leftism is that they market themselves based on politics of envy, right? Because they understand demographics. The demographics are, there are far more people who are middle class and lower in this country than there are who are upper class. So if all you're trying to do is win votes, you try to say things that appeal to the lower end of the spectrum because there's more votes, and therefore in a democracy, you will always win. And they say things like, We need to do this to help these people. We need to do that to help these people. But it is the definition of rules for thee and not for me. So think about some of the policies that the Labor and particularly the Greens have been discussing recently. There was talks recently where they want to start including the family home in the means test for the pension, right? So the only reason you would do that at the absolute base level is because you want to take pensioners and remove some of their pensions from them to save money.
Yeah.
It's the only reason you would do that. However, there has never been any mention of means testing the parliamentary pension scheme.
Which
Right?
is way more lucrative.
So Albo, we covered this a little while ago. When Albo retires from politics, his parliamentary pension scheme, because he was one of the lucky ones who got into parliament before 2004, he's still on the defined benefit scheme. He will get roughly $400,000 a year as a pension until he dies, regardless of how much money he has. Now, don't forget, we've also covered, he also recently purchased his $4.3 million mansion, right?
Yeah.
That'll be his family home. That will not be means tested for his $400,000 a year parliamentary pension. But he wants your grandma, who is asset rich and cash poor, to lose some of her pension because she lives in a house which is too expensive, which the reason why she probably hasn't sold it and downsized to something else is because she'll lose so much through taxes and stamp duties and etc. Right? So they've done the thing that they were told to do by the system, and now the system wants to rug pull them at the end of their life when they have no more earning capacity left in them to make money to pay the bills and make ends meet. It's rules for them, but not rules for Albo and his mates.
Yeah, there was another interesting topic that I heard during the week about the budget, which is they say it's to equalise the system and blah, blah, blah.
And it will.
Yeah, make everyone poor. But
Everyone will be
it's
broke
also
together.
a $70 billion increase in taxable revenue.
Yeah. But again, I want you to think about this. So it was, I think the number was 77 billion. I know because 7's my favourite number. $77 billion increase in revenue for the Australian government from these taxes. And it's going to decimate the investments of so many Australians, right? The effect on so many Australians is going to be felt astronomically for them to raise an additional $77 billion of it. And a third of that would just cover the interest bill on our national debt every year. So you're going to destroy some people's lives to create a revenue stream that only a third of it will just pay the interest bill. And it may not even pay it in the end of the next 4 years, because don't forget, it's not like they're paying down the debt. Their own budget papers show that we're at $1 trillion now, and they're forecasted to go to 1.2 trillion in 4 years.
Yeah.
So think about it this way, guys. In 2006, we had zero federal debt. Zero. Debt-free day, right? Under Howard and Costello. Because they went through, I listened to a podcast with Peter Costello the other day. They were ruthless. They went through line by line on every budget item, everything. And they're like, we don't need this. Cut this. Find this for cheaper. They did everything. They did it the way you would do it if you're running a business. They did it correctly. And in just 20 years, and I understand that the Libs were in charge for some of that time as well. I get that. We always talk about Liberal, Labor, Uni Party. They did this stuff together. All the key bits of legislation that have been brought in to take more control and more money from us and remove our freedom in our lives was by the Liberal, Labor duopoly. They work together. They pretend they're enemies, and then they vote together to get this legislation through. But we've literally gone from $0 debt in 2006 to $1 trillion worth of debt in 2026, 20 years time. And don't forget, about 10 years of that, we're almost at 0% interest rates too. And now we're in a rising interest rate period. So the interest on that debt gets bigger and bigger every single year. And guess what happens in, a year or two if we keep going down the same path? The IMF comes out and downgrades our credit rating. Right? Because our ability to service that debt becomes riskier and riskier because we are not improving productivity in this country. We're not doing any of the things that you're supposed to do to actually fix the economy. So if we get our credit rating downgraded, guess what? Our interest rate on that debt goes up. And that 26 billion goes to 30, goes to 35, goes to 40 billion a year.
So I want to show this. So I just asked what's Australia's total public debt. So including federal, state, territory and local governments, it reached 1.62 trillion in 2025, representing a 37% increase since 2020. Specific metrics of the debt include federal gross debt, approximately $971 billion, or 32% of GDP. General government net debt reaches $954 billion, which is 34% of GDP in 24-25. Per capita debt is roughly $32,000 US per person. Debt history. The debt has risen steadily from a low of $53 billion in 2007 to its current levels, with significant spike during COVID-19 pandemic. The debt is managed by Australian Office of Financial Management, and the interest costs currently amount to about $48,500 per minute.
Yeah.
Now, what's the guy, Steve Keen?
Yeah.
I think is his name. If I just change public, now I don't know what this number is. If I just change what is the public debt of Australians to what is the private debt of Australians, let's see what comes up. Australia's private debt is currently 129% of nominal GDP as of March 26, following a peak of 138% in December 2016. This figure represents the combined indebtedness of households and non-financial corporations, which is significantly higher than the country's public government debt of roughly 34%. The composition of this private debt is dominated by home mortgages, which account for about 62.5% of total private debt, while commercial loans make up the remaining 32%. Additionally, the non-banking private credit market, which serves as an alternative to traditional banking lending for business, has grown to approximately $40 billion, representing 2.5% of total business debt. So this Steve Keen guy is saying we're not even looking at the right metric.
Yeah.
Right. So the debt that we talk about all the time is the government debt, and we're guilty of that too. We look at government debt because that's what we vote for. We're not looking at the fact that our private debt that the individuals have is 130% of GDP. So what has happened over a long stretch is that, and don't forget, debt is money creation.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've had this debate with Jason before. The way that money is created in our system, when the government does their budget and they reach a deficit, that deficit is the introduction of new money to the system, but that's only a small amount. The large amount is the mortgages.
Yeah.
That's 62.5% of private debt. So that is, what's the number? That's
it doesn't even have the total number, does it?
It's probably, well, if we can assume that 1 trillion is 30% of GDP, this is 5 times that. So we're in $5 trillion worth of private debt.
Which would make sense since that's like probably 60% of the value of the housing market in this country.
Right? And we know 30% are owned outright.
Yeah.
Okay. That 5 trillion is new money in the system.
And we saw this during COVID because they're directly linked. So when everyone's talking about how housing prices essentially raised by 100% between 2019 and 2024, it's all linked to each other. Because Alex is right. When you go and get a mortgage from your bank and your bank approves the mortgage, the bank doesn't have that money. The bank is allowed to create that money via a journal entry out of thin air. So literally, the whole bank, the reason why our banks are so profitable in this country is because they're the only people who are allowed to create new money out of thin air and give it to you and get paid profit on it. Because that's what your interest is. That's profit on fake money they've just created.
Yep.
And it sounds crazy for people who don't know this. It's the system.
You didn't believe me when I told you this. You didn't believe me.
No, I thought that it was created by the bank would go to the Reserve Bank and the Reserve Bank creates the entry and credits the money. No, it's not. It's actually the private bank. I looked it up after we argued about it. So again, this is an example of when you are given new information, you can change your mind on things, right? You can update your algorithm. But But between 2019 and 2024, and this is where you like brings in the whole like immigrant conversation too, right? Because this is one of the things the people who are trying to champion mass immigration try to refer to. They say if immigrants are the reason why housing prices are high, well, COVID disproves that because during COVID we had no immigration and housing prices went through the roof.
Yeah.
And
that was Friendly Jordings. What a fucking moron.
Yeah, but again, he's not a moron. He's really smart. He knows his viewers are dumb. That's the problem. And that's what I think is so insidious about leftism. They disrespect their own supporters so much that they know they're so dumb they will swallow this shit when the spokesperson knows they're lying. That's the thing that's insidious, right? So, from 2019 to 2024, you've had COVID. And you're right, we didn't have immigration. But we also only had a small amount of businesses who were allowed to run, and no one was allowed to go on overseas travel. So what did a whole bunch of people do? They moved around the country. So you saw a massive move of people from, say, Melbourne and Sydney up to Queensland, for example, because they were trying to escape the lockdowns and everything that came with that. You also saw people upgrading their homes. So people were taking out loans because you can't go on an overseas holiday. So if I'm going to be stuck in my house, I may as well do upgrades and renos and stuff like that. So every single one of these loans that was taken to purchase a new house or do this or do that towards a housing market created new money. And as we tracked on the show, the money supply between 2019 and 2024 in Australia, the total number of Australian dollars in circulation doubled in that period of time. So the housing prices didn't double. The value of the Australian dollar halved in that time.
And more importantly, your labour, the pay that you get, halved.
Was cut in half. The spending power that you received per hour worked was cut in half because of these financial policies that we have. But again, no one in the government talks about it. And why?
Yep.
Because both sides of the Liberal-Labor duopoly they receive money and donations from the big four banks. There is a reason why the big four banks in this country are four of the strongest and most profitable banks on the fucking planet when we only have a population of, well, it's now just ticked over 28 million people.
Yeah.
It's because of policies like this. And every single time the government comes out and goes, we've got a 5% home buyer scheme that you could, to get young people into a house. Yeah, great. You're going to get a $1 million mortgage. The winner out of that is the bank who gets to create $1 million from nowhere and get interest on $1 million from you for 30 years. The bank wins. The young person doesn't win.
Yeah.
And this is something that I posted up during the week too. I was gonna post a reel, but I ran out of time. Mainstream media sources, and now I'm seeing news stories everywhere. Oh, these 5% deposit scheme borrowers, now lots of them, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, are in negative equity on their houses. These poor kids, who could have seen this coming? Well, if you listen to the VK bros, you would have seen this coming late last year. As soon as this scheme was announced, we spoke about it on the show, and we said we knew there was a correction coming next year. And right, money where my mouth is. I sold my house in January because I saw the correction coming. Now, this was before the Iran oil shock. This was before the tax changes on CGT and negative gearing. They were all also having a negative bearing on the market, right? But I knew interest rate rises were coming because the number one thing that I know is that the interest rate rises are predominantly based on inflationary environment, which has been created by our own government, right? It was always going to happen.
Yep.
So we spoke about it late last year, and it is now July. It's almost 12 months later, and mainstream's caught up. And guess what? These young kids, again, I think we said this at the time too, this policy was never about helping young people into a house. The real reason for this policy, the intended consequence of this policy, was twofold. Number one, all the wealthy people in this country who built wealth through property knew that the 18-year property cycle was peaking and they needed to get out. But there was no one to sell to. So these young people became exit liquidity for the rich people that the Labor government claims to hate.
Yep.
Right? So exit liquidity means they got to sell out to you, the young person, because all of a sudden you could afford to pay the money for their house that you couldn't before. Great deal for them. And It is a gigantic financial windfall for the big bag friends. Because now a young kid who could never get a foot in the door before now has a $1 million mortgage that they'll pay interest on for 30 years.
Well, I think the more insidious part of that equation, which is not spoken about at all, is you're now in complete servitude to the system.
Correct.
You have no financial freedom anymore.
Yeah.
$1 million is what, $5,000 a month, $6,000 a month in a mortgage payment?
Yeah, it's about $6,000 a month.
Now, who's got $6,000 a month? I had 2 houses that cost me less than $6,000 a month. Not that long ago.
And every time the rate rises go up by 0.25%, you're probably talking $300 a month more after tax that you have to find.
So you now have to stick to that job that hasn't met CPI.
Mm-hmm.
The real wage rise has not risen since 2016. It's going backwards. Okay, so you earn less, have to pay, you owe more, and you get paid less, which means you are stuck. Which means you are now a battery for the matrix.
Absolutely, and that's the intended consequence. So just like Julia Gillard, to tie it back to that, 14 years later, absolving her of her own sins, saying the discussion was different back then than what it is today, and pretending she couldn't have foreseen the issues that would arise from removing the definition of a woman from the Sex Discrimination Act. In 14 years' time, when Albo's retired, still sipping Mai Tais on $400,000 a year of your money, plus he gets an office, plus he gets a driver, plus he gets all these other perks. So the real value of the package is probably over $1 million a year until he dies. And when he does, his misso gets $250,000 a year until she dies, which I don't think a lot of people know about either, right? And in 14 years' time, in Albo, when we look back at the wreckage left behind of GFC 2.0, when young people absolutely destroyed their financial futures because, like, okay, this is what can happen, right? And this is where you need to actually break it down to dollars and cents and be rational about this. Here's the reality. The only people who took advantage of the 5% deposit scheme were people who are least equipped to handle rate rises and to handle rises in the cost of living. Because the fact they had to use in the first place means they don't have a high income and they don't have much savings, right? Mm-hmm. So they took it out late last year. They're now in negative equity because in those major markets like Sydney and Melbourne, for example, they're basically saying that houses have dropped between $50,000 and $120,000 already in just those two cities. Okay? So now that young person owes more money on the house than what the house is actually worth. And then when rate rises go up, and when inflation kicks up again because of this minimum wage increase that Albo's just given to the country, and then the cost of groceries and fuel and everything, like fuel prices are about to go back up again because the excise has just been halved. And then when it was fully removed, and then they halved it, and then it'll be completely gone. So fuel prices are about to go through the roof again, which means that every product you buy that gets delivered around the country, the cost of that will go up because they'll have to factor in the fuel prices. These young people are being squeezed. And some of them, it won't be all of them, some of them will be able to get through it. But there will be a percentage of these kids who will be forced to sell their properties at a loss, which means they will be homeless and they will still have to pay off the shortfall of the debt. Because this is the thing that people don't realize about lender's mortgage insurance. You said it last week. Lender's mortgage insurance should be illegal, or it should at least be paid for by the lender. Yeah. Lender's mortgage insurance protects the lender from losses, not you.
Yeah.
The way the legislation works, let's say your house loses too much value, you have to fire sale it, you lose $100,000 on that transaction. The lender's mortgage insurance pays the lender the $100,000 shortfall, so they're not without any money, and they get to take your house and they on-sell it to someone else. You then owe that insurance company the $100,000, and you have to pay that off. So you're going to have kids who are going to have no home and a $100,000 debt and nothing to show for it. That's what's going to happen.
So here you go. The long-term cost report for the public sector superannuation scheme and the Commonwealth superannuation scheme estimated the unfunded liability for these defined benefit schemes will peak and $190 billion for the one financial year, 2033 to 34.
Yeah.
Following this peak, the projected liability is expected to decline to $62 billion by 2060. So we're talking nearly $200 billion a year until 2060.
In non-means tested parliamentary pensions.
Yeah, so
meanwhile, they want your granny's house she lives in to be factored into her means test for her pension, which is already completely inadequate.
Yeah. Just put that into context. Can you see Javier Milei doing that?
No.
He canned it. He froze the wages. He got rid of departments. He like, this is the thing. We're going buck wild on the credit card, man.
Yep.
Buck wild. On the public and private credit card.
Mm-hmm.
We're going fucking crazy, guys. Like, it has to pop eventually. This is unsustainable.
And again, like...
And this is what pisses me off when people go like, oh, just tax gas or just tax multinational corporations. No amount of tax is going to bridge that gap.
But also, that money's just going to get stolen anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, look, talking about billions of dollars, right? Look at the CFMEU scandal down in Victoria. $15 billion is what they're saying has been stolen. And I don't know if you've kept up on some of the reporting on this too. Do you know how that there's this new thread that's being pulled where a very, millions of dollars is finding its way into Mick Gatto's bank account?
Yeah. Right?
Mick Gatto, underworld figure that everyone knows about because he's made famous in shows like Underworld. He has been embroiled in this again because apparently, again, he's basically a standover guy. He's the guy between that you have to pay cash to even get work on a lot of these government build sites. And you might be able to look this up. I should have found something before. I'm pretty sure this week some new legislation just got passed at a federal level, which is essentially going to make it possible for similar procurement problems that happen in Victoria to happen at a federal level, where essentially, I think the change was, I might be wrong on this, so, I'm happy to be corrected. I believe they have just passed legislation to basically say, if you are going to be used to give a government service, you must have a unionized workforce.
Okay.
Which that's what it is down in Victoria, right? That's why this big build thing is so corrupt. Because the Labor government changed the rules to say you will only be given government funding for projects if you have a unionised workforce. Which means the only people who can make money from the government on these build projects are the CFMEU and their other union friends down there. And as we constantly talk about, and I did a deep dive into it, we'll talk about this a little bit more next week, a bit more in depth. People need to understand the insidious relationship between unions, the Labor Party, and the superannuation companies, because they are all directly intertwined. And from a very base level, it essentially looks like this. People who work for unions, construction unions and everything like that, they rise up through the ranks. They are then given roles as like ministerial staffers for politicians in the Labor Party. Then they get pre-selection to be politicians in the Labor Party. Then, obviously, whilst they're in power, they make decisions which directly benefit these unions. And then, when these people get voted out or lose their jobs, a lot of them go on to then either be part of the union again or be on things like superannuation boards and stuff like that. Like, again, I think we already spoke about this a few weeks ago. But the fact that Wayne Swan, ex-Labor Treasurer Wayne Swan, can currently be the president of the Australian Labor Party, as well as serving on the board of Cbus Super, is a gigantic conflict of interest. So when you look at these changes that were just made to CGT and capital gains tax and negative gearing, but particularly capital gains tax, you need to see the fact that the only investment vehicle that they didn't increase the CGT take on was the big superannuation companies. Self-managed super, they changed it. And don't forget, the Greens also lobbied to make the change so that people can no longer buy properties through their self-managed super, as if that was a large percentage of the investor market, which it wasn't. But you can still buy it through your industry super fund. Like, these tax changes were directly to benefit their buddies at the superannuation companies.
Yeah.
And again, you talk about all the time. Every time Labor gets into power, they try to increase the percentage that you have to pay into your super that you don't get to.
They do.
Yeah, that you don't get to touch for 35 years. So, like, we have these people talking about fascism and, these oligarchs controlling people, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? If you don't like Elon Musk, you don't have to buy a Tesla.
Yeah.
You don't have to use Starlink. You don't have to give him $1 of your money. But if you don't like your superannuation company, too bad. Because the government will take 15% of it and give it to them, and they get to play with your money and take $30 billion a year in fees, because that's the cost to Australian people, $30 billion a year in fees to play with your money so that you get a little bit back at the end. Oh, and by the time you retire, we'll just increase the fucking income tax rake on that once you get that lump sum back at the end anyway.
Like I keep saying too, superannuation contributions start at 4%. 7%, 9%, 11%, 12%. What's it today? I think it's just gone up to 12 point something.
I think it's going to go to 15. I think it's 15 in the public sector.
Well, there you go, 15%. Okay, so if you extrapolate that over time, what is the idea to have a 50% tax rate and a 50% superannuation rate? And it sounds insane, doesn't it? But like, it's charting that way.
Welcome
There's
to communism.
no talk about it stopping.
But the good news, Alex, is that they will get such a tax increase that they will be able to redistribute that wealth back to you, and they'll make sure that you've got enough money just to survive, but you'll still have to go to work every day. And next thing you know, like I said this when those tax changes were announced, this is communism by stealth.
Yep.
That's what this is. That is the intended consequence of the policy. They market it as creating intergenerational fairness, and they will get intergenerational fairness because in 2 generations, everyone will be as broke as each other because the ability to build wealth in this country will be removed from you by the state, who will redistribute it to people based on their needs, but they will take from you based on your capabilities. Welcome to communism, guys.
Yeah, we're there, dude. We're there.
That's happening.
I think we should leave it there because I think that is an absolute banger. It is something that I feel very, very, very strongly, passionately about, considering I've essentially built my portfolio outside of this system.
Yeah.
I have a self-managed super fund. I'm trying to debank myself as much as I possibly can. I don't have a mortgage. And it really irked me when I realized that they were just printing money out of thin air and selling it back to me. I was like, well, and then tell me this, like, this is, again, my brain's not mathematically smart enough to figure this part out, but you're probably better at this. So let's say you have a 30-year mortgage on $1 million, right? But real wages are declining over that time, and the introduction of new money is rapidly entering the system. Your mortgage payment today, compared to what it's going to be in 15 years' time, are you not getting poorer in that time, not richer?
No, ironically, it actually goes the other way. Because when you take that loan out, the most expensive that loan will be on a real wage perspective is the day you take it out. And due to inflation over time, as inflation erodes at the value of the dollar, like let's say you borrowed 400 grand, well, 400 grand 10 years ago is worth far less than 400 grand now. So your wage will actually rise due to inflation.
But your payment is indexed so I agree with you on the total number.
Yeah.
But you're not dealing with the total number. You're dealing with a monthly payment.
Yeah.
And that monthly payment, the effort of your wages to generate that is having to increase, even though the number's staying the same.
Yeah.
Right? So essentially, you're having to give more labor over time to pay the same debt.
Correct. And again, think about what the thing even is, right? It's for a house. So when, obviously in Australia, we have a very broken relationship with housing because housing should not be a wealth creation tool. Our economy is built around housing being a wealth creation tool because a primary winner is the banks. The banks win, and also governments too. And this will be interesting too. I think that I know what the catalyst is going to be to remove these CGT negative gearing changes. Because you guys need to understand that this experiment has been tried multiple times in the past. It happened in New Zealand only in 2021. They did the exact same tax changes. 2 years later, they were removed. And I think the catalyst in Australia will be State governments. Because they're going to come out and go, we're not getting any stamp duty. Stamp duty is one of the number one income streams for state governments. And if you aren't having people buying and selling houses, that stamp duty starts to obviously dry up. And then they will go to the government and go, well, either you have to redistribute more federal taxes to us as states so we can pay for vital services, or you switch the tap back on for the housing market and then we can get it back through stamp duty again. I reckon that'll be one of the reasons why they change it back. At least one of the justifications.
All of them are broken. All of those systems are broken. All of those things are detrimental to the daily operations of being a human being in Australia.
And again, that'll be the sales pitch that is used as the reason to justify removing the changes. But what the real thing and the intended consequence in the background is, young people became exit liquidity for the wealthy to sell out at the top of the property cycle. And those wealthy people want to buy back in at the bottom, which is being artificially hastened by these tax changes. So they're all going to get their bets in early, and then they'll take all the changes away again, and then you'll see the next property cycle kick off.
I'm already seeing this with some of the rich people I know that are going buying properties in Melbourne right now because, like, that's gone backwards at a rate of knots.
That's why I'm sitting on my cash at the moment.
Yeah.
Because that was our plan. Sell out at the peak, wait for, and again, a correction might only be 5 to 10%, but on a $1.5 million house, that's 150 grand.
Yeah,
that's a lot of cheddar, right?
Yeah.
For literally not doing a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to come next. And look, just before we wrap up, because I do want to talk about this doublespeak, because you mentioned doublespeak before, and it is an extremely important concept for people to understand. I think that a lot of people who are conservative leaning inherently understand this, because I believe conservative people lean more towards what is true in a rational sense, whereas progressive and liberals lean more towards what makes them feel good. So, like, for example, if you're a left-leaning person listening to that Julia Gillard speech, you will feel icky about blaming her for a thing that she is trying to claim she had no knowledge of what the unintended consequences would be down the track. Whereas a conservative-leaning person would look at that and go, well, she opened Pandora's box by changing that legislation. So what happened today is a direct result of her government's actions, and we should hold her accountable for that, right? It's a different mentality around these things. And, let's talk about like Victoria, for example. So Victoria just released their crime statistics for the last 12 months. Everything's up, right? And we see it. We see the news stories every day, but it's like, I think all general crime is up like 23% over the last 12 months. Vehicles thefts are up 65% in the last 12 months. Like it's horrendous.
Go buy a manual, people. Go buy a manual.
Yeah. And it's horrendous numbers, right? Yeah, because no one will steal it. It's horrendous numbers. And then meanwhile, you got this Victorian government, right, who comes out and goes, well, we've got machete crime on our streets, so we'll spend $13 million on these machete amnesty bins. And they only ran them for a couple of months, and then it was called off, right? So they wasted $13 million of your money.
They also spent $30,000 to fly to Queensland to buy the machetes because you can't buy them in Victoria, to then bring them back to do the ad campaign.
Yep. But the thing that people need to understand is this. This is what the government wants to happen. They want there to be more crime. They want the people to feel less safe. Because when the people feel less safe and are unable to defend themselves, so like, for example, it is illegal for women to carry pepper spray down in Victoria. I'm sure it is in Queensland as well. I'm a personal believer that women should be allowed to carry pepper spray to defend themselves, right? Why not? But they want you to feel less safe. Because then, when it gets bad enough, what do people do? Government, please help me. Please keep me safe. So what does the government do? Well,
take away freedoms.
We have to bring in more laws. We need to have cameras on every corner. Western Australia is doing this right now. There are facial recognition cameras everywhere that Western Australia has just installed. Did you know about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, facial recognition cameras installed for your safety. Like recording every single place you go, everything you do being recorded for your safety. So this is the problem. People think that leftist governments care about their people more. They don't. They want to control the people more. And they understand something fundamental, which is if you do the opposite of what you're saying you're doing, you create more chaos. This is the Hegelian dialectics, right? I want to take more control over my people. So how do I do that? Through a problem, reaction, solution lens. Okay, I've got a solution I want to impose on the people. It's facial recognition cameras everywhere. Well, how can I get that past the pub test in public? Well, I need to create a problem. The problem that I'm going to create is crime, machete crime, violent crime, right? How do I do that? Well, let's import immigrants from countries where that's normal. And let's not deport them when they do the wrong thing. But there was just a case, I think it was actually from New South Wales. 29-year-old Iraqi refugee raped a 14-year-old girl. The judge gave him a sentence deliberately less than the threshold for deportation and literally cited because they didn't want that person to be deported. Right? The only justification for that is you want that person to be back out on the streets and rape another girl to create more fear in the community. We saw this during COVID, right? We covered the story about how in 2020, especially overseas, the COVID death spikes, and we talked about this from the UK. The death spiked was directly correlated to the medical treatment that was given from up high, down low to hospitals, the protocol they had to follow, which was giving morphine and midazolam to patients, which is essentially end-of-life care that suppresses respiratory function. So they murdered people early in the pandemic to build the fear so you would accept their solution, which was the vaccines. So this is that whole thing that the tinfoil hat has said at the beginning, which I wasn't even on board with at the time, but in hindsight, I saw it very clearly. Everyone thinks the vaccines were created for COVID. They weren't. COVID was created to sell the vaccines.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It's the opposite of what you think it is. So like in Victoria, the crime is being created because they want to clamp down on your freedoms more. And they know if they make it bad enough, you will go begging for help because you're not allowed to help yourself.
Not just that, if it goes bad enough, they want the domestic population to turn on the government so that they can then enforce the domestic terrorist rules and
correct.
And then we know the link to that because that's what Mike, what's his name, the ASIO, he said that the biggest threat was like white nationalism. Oh, and by the way, then we had a brown nationalism terrorist attack. You're looking in the wrong direction, and you know it. You can't be that dumb. You can't be that dumb. You knew what was happening. You knew what you're doing, and you're stoking us in a particular way to get the result that you want.
Absolutely. And again, this was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I'm trying to find the quote here, due to what happened with Karl Stefanovic losing his job. And then when the Prime Minister weighed in, did you see Albo's comment on it?
Yeah.
So I won't find the exact quote. You guys will be able to find it. It'll be all over the internet. But the quote literally says, now look, for a start, why is the Prime Minister commenting on the firing of a private citizen anyway? Why should he have anything to do with this?
Well, media and government are in cahoots.
Absolutely. And what Albo literally said was, well, when you stray too far outside the lines of what is mainstream, look what can happen to you.
Yeah.
I said it on the show last week. They've iced Karl because they want to apply a chilling effect to anyone else out there who may consider repeating the same things that some of Karl's guests have said on his show. That is a public execution, career execution, because they know that if you do that to a high-profile figure, a whole bunch of people out there will be like, well, fuck, if they can do it to Karl, they'll do it to me. And I don't want to lose my job. This is COVID all over again, right? Reputation destruction of some famous person who stepped outside the line so you can control more people through fear. That's what this is all about. Don't let it happen. Have these conversations. Talk to each other about it. Stay tethered to reality. When something feels really good that the government's saying, peel the layers of the onion back and realize what's actually behind it and who really benefits from these policies that they're imposing on the people, because it ain't you.
And on that note,
thanks very much for joining us, guys. Stay free. We'll see you next week.